Good evening. You remember last evening we covered all the generations of the family of Noah and the fact that they had scattered throughout the earth. That was in chapter 10. And I said that it set up today's chapter, chapter 11, and the story of the Tower of Babel. So starting in verse 1. Now the whole earth had one language and few words. And as men migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the sons of men had built. And the Lord said, "Behold, they are one people, and they all have one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do, and nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." Just want to pause there. Again, this is reminiscent of what's happening at the beginning of Genesis, where it says, "Come, let us go down." It's not indicating in any way that there are a multitude of gods. What it's saying is that the nature of God is so expansive that a singular word or a singular way to represent God isn't enough. And so you'll have these passages that the plural is used because that is showing the bigness or the largeness or the expanse of God. "Come, let us go down" is really saying God is so big, I'm going to go down, but it's using the plural because God is bigger than singular. "So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore, its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth. And from there, the Lord scattered them abroad over the face over all the earth." Now, here is the famous and yet very strange story of the Tower of Babel, a time where people had a common language, and God changed that, giving them a multitude of languages and scattered them throughout the earth. This situation is actually rectified in the New Testament at the time of Pentecost, where the disciples were all gathered together in Jerusalem, and people were there from all over the world who spoke many different languages. And yet they could all understand the gospel message, the good news message of Jesus Christ in their own language. And so the Tower of Babel represents when people were unified, seeking to glorify themselves. And what happened was it ended up dividing them, scattering them. When God sought to bring people together, when they heard the message of Christ and the good news of salvation and God's love for all people, they were unified by that message. Want to continue on in verse 10. "These are the descendants of Shem. When Shem was 100 years old, he became the father of Arpachshad 2 years after the flood. And Shem lived after the birth of Arpachshad 500 years and had other sons and daughters. When Arpachshad had lived 35 years, he became the father of Shelah. And Arpachshad lived after the birth of Shelah 403 years and had other sons and daughters. When Shelah had lived 30 years, he became the father of Eber. And Shelah lived after the birth of Eber 403 years and had other sons and daughters. When Eber had lived 34 years, he became the father of Peleg. And Eber lived after the birth of Peleg 430 years and had other sons and daughters. When Peleg had lived 30 years, he became the father of Reu. And Peleg lived after the birth of Reu 209 years. You start to see the expanse of their life decreasing. Had other sons and daughters. And when Reu had lived 32 years, he became the father of Serug. And Reu lived after the birth of Serug 207 years and had other sons and daughters. When Serug had lived 30 years, he became the father of Nahor. And Serug lived after the birth of Nahor 200 years and had other sons and daughters. When Nahor had lived 29 years, he became the father of Tara. And Nahor lived after the birth of Tara 119 years, so it really drops off, and had other sons and daughters. When Tara had lived 70 years, okay, so something different happened there because all the rest had been kind of a normal age to have children, and now it jumps back up to 70 years. When Tara had lived 70 years, he became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And so now we know why, because we're getting to the beginning of the Abram or Abraham story. Now these are the descendants of Tara. Tara was the father of Abram. We'll know him later as Abraham. Tara was the father of Tara was the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran was the father of Lot. Haran died before his father Tara in the land of his birth in Ur of the Chaldeans. And Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai. We'll know her later as Sarah. And the name of Nahor's wife, Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. Now Sarai was barren. She had no child. Just to note there, anytime in scripture you hear of a woman being barren, having trouble having children, it's always a setup for a special birth story. Tara took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his grandson, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. The days of Tara were 205 years, and Tara died in Haran. So we're finally getting to some of the more familiar story, and probably where most scholars believe that the historical story begins. Most scholars believe that Abraham was a historical figure, although certainly we want to focus on the message we get from Scripture. I look forward to being with you tomorrow evening. Have a good night.